CCDA's Intentional Community Network check-in on April 8, 2026.
My name is Evan Howard. Hello. And I think my first contact with an intentional Christian community was in 1971. Um, I became a Christian through the Jesus People movement. And where I lived in Spokane, Washington, there was what we called a commune. It was a Christian commune back then. And I actually witnessed both the excitement. I wasn't a part of it. I was much younger at that point in time, but heard about them and got to know some of the folks and also got to witness the collapse of that community. Got me interested from the very beginning in both the life and deaths of communities. Um, Over the years, done a lot of schooling and a lot of visiting of other communities. I actually have visited, interesting enough, I was thinking, Toby, I visited the Bruderhof there, visited Blowing Springs, visited Jubilee Partners, visited Reba Place, and visited Englewood. Um, so I'm looking forward to it coming to the UK soon. That would be great. So, yeah, I live in Colorado now. I don't live in community right now. Um, but I do a lot of writing about communities. My background is I've done my PhD in Christian spirituality and particularly history of monasticisms and intentional Christian community and things like that. So that's my background. Enough of that. We move on to just the presentation then, Toby. Okay. I thought I would talk a little bit. Enoch mentioned the presentation I did at Blowing Springs recently, and in that I covered kind of the primary chapters of this book. It's called Deep and Wide: Reflections on Socio-Political Engagement, Monasticisms, and the Christian Life. And I thought for a CCDA group where Christian community development is central, that maybe some of the questions in that book would be helpful. In the Blowing Springs, I covered the basic chapters of the book. The book started when Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove was dropping me off at an airport and asked me, you know what we need from you, Evan, is that we here want to change the world and make some changes in socio-political things. And you're a specialist in monasticism, but sometimes it feels like monasticism gets in the way. It's an escape from socio-political engagement. So how does this work? And so I did a lot of study and produced the book. And one of the things that I realized was that people do a lot of different things to engage themselves and have over the centuries. We speak out. We care. We provide systems of care. We model a different way of life. We're involved in like direct action, or we pray. And these are different things that people have done throughout the centuries as a way of engaging ourselves in the socio-political sphere. And in the book, I have a chapter on each one, covering how people have done it in history and how communities, intentional Christian communities, new monastic communities, whatever you want to call it, do that today. Then I move in the final chapter of the book called We Live to discuss a little bit about moving from the past to the present and future. How might we do this now? How might we really engage together as communities in socio-political kinds of activities? I begin with a story. Albert will know this name very well. I begin with a story from David Jansen from the Reba Place Fellowship. And I want to quote just a little bit of it because it comes out. It brings something important to what I want to present. David Jansen writes, in the late 1970s, I felt God calling me personally to go to one of the buried missile silos in the prairies of Kansas that aim multiple warheads at population centers in Russia. God called me to announce I'd be there the first Sunday of the month, vigiling and praying for an end to the suicidal arms race. Some Sundays there were 2 or 3 of us, But on one Good Friday, we were 200, with reporters on the edge and helicopters overhead, and a speaker with a microphone had us chanting, "It's Friday, but Sunday is coming." Had I not been faithful in little, the bigger witness never would have happened. Though the world still looks a lot the same, those missile silos are now deactivated and gone. In a semi-monastic way, the witness I led at the missile silo was also closely connected to prayer, discernment, and guidance from our intentional Christian community, New Creation Fellowship in Newton, Kansas, and from a wider network of communities in resistance. It was well understood that if any of us got arrested, the community would care for our families and visit us in prison, carry on by other means. It was a communal witness, though some were more on the front lines and others in supporting roles. Now, there's three things I want to bring out in that story. Number one is that David mentioned specifically he was trying to follow a call. There was this sense, I've got to do this. Whether it's a lot of people or I'm the only one on Sunday, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be praying and I'm going to be, doing my action. So number one is that we see that our socio-political engagement oftentimes follows some kind of a call. The next thing I want to say is that what David did was prayer and action both. It is almost impossible to separate the one from the other. And you see this again and again. And then third, and the most important thing I want to talk about in a sense is that this was both personal and community. His personal activity was possible because of the community. They held his back. If something happened, they would take care. So those are the three things I want to draw out. What I do then after that story in the chapter is I bring out a lot of different stuff about community, and I focus in the end towards the benefits of intentional Christian community for socio-political action in particular. Like why? I mean, yeah, we all want to be involved. We all want to do community development, but why community? What's this whole thing? Why are in the centuries has community been a part of this? And I want to draw out my conviction that I mentioned is that it is good, enjoyable, creative, meaningful, effective. I use all of these words when we navigate our socio-political engagement in active relationship with a healthy community of kindred spirits. I don't know if you're following the Easter devotions of CCDA. I get the emails from them. And in their Easter devotions, they use this phrase lately, our God makes a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. And I really do think that it is through community that we can find a way or a ways. It facilitates those ways through the desert when we've got community. So I want to bring out about 3 or 4, no, I think 4 or 5 different points that I'll just list, and we can talk about them in the Q&A time. Number 1, engagement is often easier when it flows out of a community of common values. It is so difficult when we're divided and we can't, kind of figure out how to do things. When you have a community that agrees on something that's at least on the same page. I mean, I know we're going to disagree about this and that, and maybe Enoch, we're bringing some of that out. But when folks are on the same page, then there's a sense of, hey, we can go forward together. And when engagement comes out of a community of common values, it's important. And monasteries have been exhibiting communities of common values for centuries. Number 2, engagement is well resourced through the interactions of a community of shared practices. And what I mean by this is that different people have different skills. Someone's an organizer, someone else sets tables, someone else cares for people. I'm involved currently. I'm very active in the unhoused community where I live. And there's a group of us a loose community, you might say. And it's just beautiful to see the diversity. One person is a pastor to homeless encampments and just regularly goes and visits and knows the people. Another person has a truck and can deliver water. Another person is a caseworker and knows all the resources. Another person is a political organizer and gives us the arguments of laws that we can be for or against and how to develop that. Another person is working to build alternative housing or become a slumlord and develop housing that way. And so this variety of gifts within a community working together. We meet on Wednesdays and have what we call the Solutions for the Unhoused meeting, where we all share our ideas and subcommittees around that. I mean, we've seen just a kind of really creative environment throughout history. I mean, you think of Greenwich Village, you think of Philadelphia in 1995 to 2005, and some of the fruit that came from all of that. So engagement is well resourced. Next, um, socio-political engagement is conducted with confidence when it has been co-discerned. I think it's a really valuable thing. I've been a part of communities or helped them, and I'm like, well, where do we get involved? How do we do this? And when you learn to discern as a community, you begin to think together, you begin to pray together, and out of it you say, no, I think I mean, like Jubilee Partners they've done a good job of co-discerning their call toward working with refugees and realizing, no, we're not going to spread ourselves really thin and do this and that and that. We're going to focus a lot of our energy around this, and it's been a really helpful thing for them. Reba Place, on the other hand, has discerned different kinds of calls that they're involved in simultaneously. And different people will do it different ways, but the important thing is when you co-discern it as a community, you just have a lot greater confidence when you step in to the socio-political engagement itself. Next, community involvement provides an environment of support. It is so lonely doing socio-political action alone. And you go to a march or you do this or you try and create a system of care. I mean, I've seen again and again, we don't have any representatives from the Church of the Sojourners here today, but they do so well at embracing a few people on the margins that any individual family could not possibly embrace, but a community as a whole can really embrace someone like that and provide an environment of care. Um, so that's another thing. I mean, David Jansen mentions himself that in that story, that if it wasn't for the community, you wouldn't be as likely to go on this march and feel comfortable getting yourself arrested because who's going to take care of your kids? These kind of things. The next one, I think that healthy community itself is an expression of socio-political engagement. In the anarchist world, there's a phrase that is used called prefigurative politics. And what we mean by that phrase is that we prefigure by the way we do our action, by the way we conduct our marches, by the way we provide alternative structures, these sorts of things. What we want to do is model by our action the ways in which we want the world to become. Um, and so, and if we're going to do a Black Lives Matter march, it should be led by people of color. If we're going to, have a conference on the environment, it might be nice if it was in a green building or, these sorts of things. So how we treat each other, how we deal with conflict, those kinds of things. And then the other thing is that finally, prayer is sustained in community. It's amazing how powerful just prayer itself for the world. I mean, I could, go back to the 8th, 9th century and talk about the monasteries in Cluny that prayed for their governments for for generation upon generation because it was part of their routine to do this kind of thing. Another person, Vincent Harding, in his book, There is a River, The Black Struggle for Freedom in America, Vincent Harding does a really good job in his coverage of the history of the struggle for Black freedom, of showing how different people did different things. And he talks specifically about prayer. He writes, although it is hard to grasp in a secular age, large numbers of Black people believe that their best contribution to the struggle was through unremitting prayer. Like some widespread, unorganized, unrecognized core of spiritual resistance, these Black men, women, children were everywhere disciplining their wills, turning themselves to the work of praying for freedom. And I just see this again and again, how important, prayer is. I devote a whole chapter to that in the book. There's a fabulous, and if there's anything that would advertise the book, it would be in the chapter on prayer, there's a really, really special answered prayer of Thomas Merton that I discovered when doing my research. Anyway, I have found throughout history and watching things today that communities of Christians devoted to loving God and their neighbor and sharing their own life together in the process of doing just that have been and can be a powerful influence for social good and the glory of God, just by doing that together. And so I've just given you a few examples of how community can facilitate that. So with that, we can have some Q&A. And we've got a lot of people with different backgrounds, so this is a great conversation.
CCDA's Intentional Community Network check-in on April 8, 2026.
My name is Evan Howard. Hello. And I